Hahn is here. We have Councilman Fred Peralta, and we have Commissioner Jim Fambro here tonight also. Councilor Gonzalez is in Washington, D.C. I believe he's arriving tonight at some point. So again, thank you for being here. Thank you for taking interest in our community, our downtown area. And with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Bellis, and we'll go from there. Thank you.
Thank you. This is the second of what so far is going to be 3 sessions on the downtown. The first one was in regards to events, and some more discussion in regards to a particular event, which was the Farmers Market. And I'm presuming things will probably work the same way, is that the council is here to gain your input as the public into some of these issues of the downtown. And then they take that back, work on that together, and decide what actions they would like to take at a subsequent meeting. So if you have interest on any of these subjects, how they're to be followed up, just follow our weekly agendas. And any formal action that's going to be taken must be listed on those agendas in advance. Tonight we have sort of an abbreviated agenda, but there are all issues that are outstanding and need to be resolved. If you don't have a copy, there are some up here, there's some on the back table. We're going to have a presentation tonight from a representative from the New Mexico Economic Development Department that oversees the Main Street and Arts and Culture District programs. That's Eduardo Martinez. And Eduardo's been here a number of times with the town and the county working on the program. He's familiar with the area. And then we'll follow up with individual discussion points. To just give, for those, there are some people here that may not be familiar with the background. About 6 years ago, the town received a designation from New Mexico Economic Development for an arts and cultural district. And that operated for about 3 years under a contract under which the town provided about $40,000 for a consultant as a managing director of the program, worked with a volunteer board. That board still exists, but about a year ago, or not, I shouldn't say a year ago, it's about 4 months ago, decided to go dormant until there was a decision by the town, the county, and the state, everyone, as to what the future of that program was. So at the end of that 3 years, there was a decision by the town that they did not feel that they were getting out of the contract what was promised. There was a disagreement with the coordinator as to whether products were being delivered, and the MOU was about to expire. There has to be an agreement between the Arts and Culture District and the town. Subsequent to that, the county picked up the program for about a year. I believe it was last July. Their funding on that agreement to fund it for 1 year ran out. In the interim, the county received a designation. I'm sorry, I should say the town received a designation from the state as a Main Street community. These two programs, while they're separate, fit together. And you'll understand the difference a little better when Eduardo explains them. But the ACD signed the new MOU. Originally there was a proposal to the town, the county, the state, and the ACD to sign on together to be a Main Street district. I know this is confusing. And then when the county gave it up, sort of only the ACD signed the MOU. So there needs to be a governmental entity for the program to continue to sign on, either the town or the county. And as of July, I believe, the county's interested in that. They felt that it was more appropriate that it be operated as a town program. The town has not re-signed that. So there have been a number of letters back and forth extending the offer. But at some point, if the town does not make a decision, the ACD does not make a decision to sign the MOU to continue the program, the state has indicated it will rescind that designation. So the hope is there's a lot of options on how to govern your downtown and provide direction. And arts and culture districts, historic districts, special improvements districts, business improvement districts, chambers of commerce. And so if this is a hope that we can decide as a community, provide guidance to the elected officials. Whether we want to continue the arts and cultural district, we want to start up and implement Main Street district, which is more business oriented, or is there a need for another type of organization, such as the Downtown Business Merchants Association, to help provide guidance to the town, to the county too. They have an investment in the downtown, and to the elected officials on the future of the downtown. These forums are wonderful. We love to see everybody here. We love to get your input, but they tend to be long meetings, and it's tough to reach a consensus when you have 30, 40 people. This is probably one of the smaller meetings we've had, so hopefully we'll keep within our time frame. And as housekeeping, the bathrooms are right behind us, the hallway, and we're going to try and be out of here close to the time frame we did in our first meeting, which I think worked well, which is we'll run from 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock. And after the presentations, all of you will be allowed to give your suggestions and your comments. And we are filming this, and this will be available, as all 3 of these will be on Channel 22. The last of the 3 series, unless there's more topics to cover, will happen 3 weeks from today, and that will be about the historic district, the sign code, the design codes for the historic district, and some grants that we have involving the historic district, and any changes that might need to be made in the ordinances, or do they need to be enforced more, that sort of thing. So with that, I'd like to welcome Eduardo back to our fair town, and thank him for all he's doing.
Shall I use the mic? Rick? Okay, can everybody hear me? So first of all, Mayor Barone, members of the council, Rick, thank you for inviting me back to Taos. I do want to start off by relaying the regrets of the Main Street Director, Rich Williams, who was hoping to be here tonight and could not make it, busy with the legislative work right now. And so just by way of introduction, my name is Eduardo Martinez, and I am the organization program associate for New Mexico Main Street. I'm one of 10 program associates, and technically we are not state employees. We're consultants and contractors to the Main Street program, each of us in different content expertise areas. So my support to the Main Street and the arts and cultural district communities is really around the organizational development work. So the nonprofit management, the board development, the compliance issues for the state, the annual performance reviews, and then often the negotiations between the revitalization organization, the state, and the local government on the memorandums of agreement. So I'm just going to go through, I have only 9 slides, and I'll go through these fairly quickly. And so, as Rick said, the little bit of background. So Main Street is a community economic development initiative. It's much different than most economic development work. It's really about the community together and deciding what kind of economic development they want to do in their community. Main Street has been around. This year we'll be celebrating its 30th year in New Mexico. The arts and cultural districts, much shorter time, was created by statute in the state legislature in 2007. So Main Street Communities has actually, the Economic Development Department is authorized by the National Main Street Center to implement the program in New Mexico. And then the Economic Development Department authorizes the member communities. And right now there are 28 Main Street communities around the state, 9 arts and cultural districts, and so Taos is included in both of those counts as well. It is an application process, and it does require, as Rick said, the participation of a local government partner. When the application comes into the Economic Development Department, there is a review process, there's a readiness assessment. A team of people come in and basically look at the community's readiness to implement the program. Taos came in as a arts and cultural district only at the time that it was designated, and the Main Street piece was added later. And I'll talk a little bit about the challenges with that. There are really four phases of the designation. For a Main Street community, there's an emerging piece. It's usually anywhere from 12 to 18 months. A lot of organizational development work in that first year. really setting up the organization, the partnerships, the foundational work. At that point, a Main Street community or an arts and cultural district moves into what's called a startup phase. The state historically has released resources, financial resources for a downtown master plan, or in the case of Taos, a cultural plan, as well as an in-depth economic analysis of the community during that second year. So in the second year in the startup phase, you're moving away from a lot of the foundational organizational work and moving into the actual picking up of the projects. After that, you can move to a state certified program, and that is renewed every year, not only for the Main Street programs, but for the arts and cultural districts as well. There is an annual performance review that the state conducts for each community between October and March. And the results of those reviews are not only reported to the National Main Street Center, but the state legislature as well, which is funding this. For those communities, new this year, for those communities who have not been able to meet the funding requirements by the local government or the staffing requirements required by the state, we have created this second tier. It's called a partnership program. And the only difference between that and state certified is the level of resources and technical assistance support that the state provides on an annual basis. For those that are performing really well, you do have a national accreditation process, and that's really an honorary designation, but most communities can turn that into a resource development piece. So high-performing organizations are selected to be national accreditation. So a little bit about the Main Street community. It does require what's called a public-private partnership and how that's defined by the state. In each community, there has to be a local government partner. There has to be a nonprofit or a downtown revitalization organization. And then the state government is the third part of the space. The downtown revitalization organization is the one that's really bringing the community stakeholders into the space, right? So the circle at the top of the stakeholders and the C3 corporation at the bottom is really the community-driven aspect of that point, working in partnership with the local government and the state government. A little bit about what they have to bring to the space. So first of all, the local government, they have to provide a philosophical commitment to move the Main Street, the Arts and Cultural District work. And that's executed by a memorandum of understanding between the state, the local government, and the Main Street or Arts and Cultural District. They are expected to be very much involved in the coordination and the planning of your downtown revitalization work. A lot of the state resources, especially when you get to capital outlay money and capital outlay set-asides for your downtown revitalization that comes through the Economic Development Department, has to go directly to the local government partner. So you want your local government to really identify in partnership with your downtown revitalization team, what are the infrastructure projects we want to work on and prioritize. There is an expectation, depending on the size of the community, that the local government provides financial support for the operations, right? And so for a community of 5,000 people or higher, 5,000 to 15,000, 5,000 to 50,000, about $35,000 a year, the expectation of the local government providing operations support to the organization, right? The board for that organization, Arts and Cultural District or the Main Street organization, is expected to do their own resource development to match that. So there are minimum requirements for operating funds for both the Main Street and ACD program. And then, as I said earlier, the local government is the fiscal agent for any capital outlay money that comes through downtown as well. The state program provides primarily, or at least I should say first, what you see most of is the technical assistance. So organizational development experts, an urban planner, historic preservationist, an architect, cultural resources planner, an economic development expert, and those are my colleagues, and we travel on request to each community for specific technical assistance pieces. After that, if the legislature funds it, there is a capital outlay set aside. It's a competitive process between all the Main Street communities, so when that money is set aside for the Main Street program, those communities that have projects on their ICIP, Infrastructure Capital Improvement Plan, and are prioritized by the local organization, compete for those resources as well, right? There is also a coordination and reporting piece that the state provides, New Mexico Main Street provides to the state legislature and the National Main Street Center. There are compliance issues because this is a state program funded by taxpayer dollars. The legislature would like to see the return on their investment as well. So we cannot provide any resources to a community or a program that is not meeting its compliance requirements to the state. And then for an arts and cultural district, there's also coordination with the Department of Cultural Affairs and the New Mexico Arts Program, the New Mexico Arts Commission as well. So I've mentioned that ACDs came in much later than the Main Street program. Main Street program has been funded every year by the state legislature. Arts and cultural districts to date have not. They have not been directly funded. So, but the legislature assigned the coordination of that work to the Economic Development Department, the Main Street program, and that's how you're able to get resources for an arts and cultural district is alongside with the Main Street work. And then the local affiliates, part of their work is to implement the projects in the 4 points. I'll talk about that a little bit, to do their own resource development work to get some matching resources for projects, to do the actual planning or facilitate the planning of the community-driven economic development work, and then the coordination with the local government and the state in the process. So the Main Street 4 points, very quickly, is 4 areas: design, economic positioning, promotions, and organization. The design pieces, these are the 4 areas that really come together around revitalizing your historic commercial district downtown. So the design piece is making your downtown physically attractive, that people want to be there. Beautification projects, streetscapes, infrastructure, historic preservation is a key component of the design work as well. Right? Promotions is events, retail events, special events, festivals, etc. Those things that start to bring people back into your downtown, right? So now you have the design work, making it physically attractive. You have the promotions, bringing people down there. Economic positioning is really the key piece here because this is about revitalizing the economy of your downtown, right? So restoring the economic health of your downtown. Business analysis, economic analysis, business recruitment, business retention, business development work. And then the organization piece is really that volunteer-driven and part that makes the other 3 points move forward. If you're an arts and cultural district, you have very similar 4 points, different language, okay? So organization is now called capacity and sustainability. Economic positioning is called cultural planning and development. Physical planning and development is the design point, and then branding and marketing is the promotions piece. The difference between an arts and cultural district, well, there are a couple of things, but the primary difference is that arts and cultural district is moving the revitalization work around a creative economy. Arts, culture, cultural resources, arts entrepreneurism, galleries, right? So Taos is a really good fit, has always been a really good fit for the arts and cultural district designation. Typically in a community, this is what the organizational structure looks like. So you'll see at the top left, the local government partner. You have a Main Street and/or / arts and cultural district organization, a board of directors. You have some staffing assigned to that. And then you have teams that are moving the work of their 4 points. So this is planning each year, prioritizing projects, working with your local government to move these 4 points. When you have an arts and cultural district, and as I mentioned, there are 9 of the 28 communities in the state, it's usually a 5th committee, 5th organization, 5th structure attached to the Main Street program. At the top right, you'll see a green box with some large green arrows. This is largely tools that present a cash flow to support your project. So Local Economic Development Act, Metropolitan Redevelopment Area, Business Improvement District, all those tools that can help support the projects of that work, right? So a little bit different for Taos in that the ACD designation preceded the Main Street designation of this community. Okay, so that's how it's typically structured. A little bit about what you get. What are the benefits? So I talked a little bit about the financial resources, the capital outlay money, the LEADA funds. The state is also looking at trying to bring in a number of other resources to support your community. Now it's, historically, capital outlay was a primary source of the funding for your projects, and now it's really more of a mosaic of funding pieces that really help move your work. So NMFA, MFA, CDBG funds, federal highway transportation dollars, all those pieces is what the economic development is working with their partners to bring resources to the revitalization of your community, right? There are also nonprofit partner organizations. There's you'll see the second to last bullet on the left says NMRA. That is a group called the New Mexico Resiliency Alliance, and they are the state's nonprofit partners. So they apply for and receive foundation grants and then re-grant them to your downtown revitalization projects. Usually small grants, small seed grants, $3,000 to $5,000. Once in a while we'll have $10,000 grants coming through there, right? There's a third organization, the last bullet on the left is the New Mexico Coalition of Main Street Communities, and all of the member communities are members of the coalition, and they do the advocacy work at the state legislature to keep the resources flowing into the capital outlay and other sources for your community. Right? On the right side, I already talked about the technical expertise. This is 12 individuals on contract to the Economic Development Department. When a request for a specific assistance comes in from a community, the state approves it, and then they forward that request to the technical expert, right? And we have 2 weeks to schedule that time in the community. We're scheduled out really about 3 months down the road, but all of this work is really about expanding your team locally, especially in smaller rural communities that don't have the resources to hire all that. So historic preservationists, somebody who will help you with the historic building nominations or the historic district nominations, an architect who specializes in historic preservation as well. So these are the primary resources and supports that New Mexico Main Street provides through the Economic Development Department. And then I think just to close a little bit, I already talked about the partnerships, but the expectations, this is really how we at the state look at each community. How strong is the public-private partnership in moving the work? What is the organizational capacity of the downtown revitalization organization to move the work? What is the progress and the achievement in each of the 4 areas, whether that's a Main Street program or an arts and cultural district, and then how is that coordinated between the state and local partners? In many of our communities, we have I think almost all the communities, the local municipal government is a local partner. In some communities, it's the county. Some of our communities have both partnering in the space. And I think I'll close just by saying we have a lot of people in the room, and I would be remiss in saying there are a number of opportunities for the community to get involved in this work. So reach out to your arts and cultural district leadership. We have this structure of, historically it was committees that did this work, and it was all embodied in the organization. The state kind of measured each committee by who is on your committees and how is that work moving. And now we really look at, is the community moving the work of the 4 points? So we don't look for committees anymore, but you can pick specific tasks under each of the 4 points and move a project in that space. So you might have, it's called episodic volunteerism. You might have an individual who wants to come in and help with a website. That's all they want to do, or your social media. Provide that support, and then they step out, right? They don't have to commit to being on a committee for a year. They don't have to commit to being on the board for multi-year. Okay? So this creates opportunities for the greater membership of the community to be involved in your downtown revitalization process. I did have one last slide that I just want to talk about, I think because it came up. Organizational structure. Gallup is a brand new, both a Main Street community and an arts and cultural district. So Gallup was actually a Main Street community twice before, and then came in again last year. So they had the program, shut the program down, and have come back in. Challenge for Gallup is that it's a smaller community, right? It's probably a little bit bigger than Taos, but it's a small community. Trying to launch a Main Street program and an arts and cultural district at the same time was a challenge. It was hard to look at building 2 different organizations They already had a business improvement district in Gallup, and that organization was the original designate of the Main Street program. So they applied for the program. They're the ones that received the designation. In Gallup, the business improvement district has voted to incubate a brand new organization created specifically just for the Main Street / Arts and Cultural District work, right? So they agreed to support it for a couple of years. They're trying to get it launched right now. The difference is that you don't have 4 points for Main Street and another 4 points for the Arts and Cultural District. They have integrated these into one organizational structure. So we're working with them right now. We've had a number of communities that have looked at different models in different spaces of the organizational structure. Raton, for example, the Arts and Cultural District was the city commission, and the Main Street program was a nonprofit. At one point, they both, the city and the nonprofit organization had resource challenges. They moved that staffing inside, and for a period of about 1.5 years, almost 2 years. And it really did not work for either the city or the community development piece. So the city actually requested that we move it back, move the designation back out to the Main Street organization. So just to give you an idea of the staffing and the structures and what might be possible. I think as we move forward with a local organization, so just one last comment about Taos Arts and Cultural District. There is the designation, and then there's Taos Arts and Cultural District, the organization as well, which is incorporated for this purpose. So I think I'll end there. I'll hang around for questions, but I hope I just gave you a little bit of background on the work, the structures, and what might be possible for Taos. Rick? Go ahead.
Questions?
Yes.
Yes, what is the yearly fee the cities pay into the state program?
There is no fee. So the memorandum of understanding requires the city to provide operational resources, or at least part of the operational resources for the downtown revitalization partnership. But there is no fee that's paid to the state.
Okay, another question. Last year, what was the amount the state legislature appropriated for the state Main Street programs? Every year they allocate so much money. What was it for, say, 2014?
Are we talking about operations or capital outlay?
Capital outlay, so that cities could apply with projects to the state. And so usually there's a budget for the whole year for Main Street programs.
Over the last 5 or 6 years, that number has fluctuated from $0 to $1 million, right? And so the request each year is from the Economic Development Department has been around $2.5 million for just to set aside for Main Street projects. This year, the request from the state and the Coalition of Main Street Communities was $5 million for Main Street programs and another $1 million for the Arts and Cultural District. The operations was funded last year by 3 initiatives, which amounted to $1.25 million for operations. And that included the Main Street program, that included the Historic Theaters Initiative, the Frontier Community Projects, which is a one-time, once-a-year project in communities smaller than 7,500 residents, and then the Arts and Cultural Districts as well. So I think each year, from one year to the next, how much the department gets for capital outlay, it really depends on the legislative process.
Okay, it's divided by all those groups, not solely for Main Street.
It is solely for Main Street, but those groups that are in the state certified, that have achieved state certified level, can actually compete for a capital outlay project. And that's where we look at, is this project prioritized by the city? Is the city ready to move? And then it's a competitive process for that as well. I had a question back there, and I'll go over here. Did you have one?
Yes, regarding the $35,000 of operational support that's required for Main Street, that used to be in the form of a director or an employee, but you didn't really talk about that. Is it just operational support, or is it you have to hire an employee to be in charge of it?
So we let the local board decide how best to spend that. We know this is a volunteer-driven process, but for us on this end, it really gets solidified when there is a staff in the space. So our recommendation is that the organization uses that to hire their executive director. And they have to develop the match funds to generate for the rest of their operations as well.
What are the factors that make it successful for a local government to say this is an objective that is important to the community? I mean, what do you have you seen in your experience with the other 27 municipalities that have decided to go forward with this and really execute? What's the winning ingredients? What are the winning ingredients?
I think if I go back to that second slide that showed the overlapping circles of the partners, that is the winning ingredient, right? So it's important to have that dedicated organization that's representing the community stakeholders. In Alamogordo, brand new Main Street community, they had a Downtown Merchants Association, they had a developing Main Street program. They came together and said, this is what we want in our downtown, right? So they're strong partners. The city came in and said, yes, we want to support it. They actually took a year in developing their application. They came in 2 years ago, they wanted to apply, and they said, we're not ready for this. So they took the time, the city took the time to plan it out. So the winning ingredient is the partners, the local government, the state government, and the community stakeholders coming together to make it happen.
How do they know when they've done something good? How do they know when it's being successful through those 2 years of being in development? Like how does it mean that there's more funds coming to it because the business community is supporting it? Is that how that goes?
We have a whole series of benchmarks that we actually measure on. So at an emerging community level, have they incorporated? Do they have teams to move the 4 points work? Do you have a board that's active? Do you have a willing partner with the local government? And then we have very specific measurements. Is the organization raising funds to match or at least support their operations, match what the local government provides, right? So those are all initial benchmarks, and then start to take on projects in each of the other 3 points. So moving from an emerging community to a state certified, it becomes much more project oriented, and the organizational work is really just a support to that. So we actually look at what were your downtown revitalization projects. We have benchmarks around public sector investment into buildings in your downtown, private sector investment. We look at your new businesses that were added, how many new jobs were added. That is tracked on a quarterly basis by the Main Street organization and reported to the state, which also goes back to the legislature. So I think from the first year at emerging to the state certified program, we have a whole list, and I'll be happy to share that with the community of the benchmarks that we use to look at the success. In the end, it's important to remember that the revitalization work isn't going to happen overnight. It is a long-term process. And so we look at the incremental steps in accomplishing the elements of a cultural plan or a downtown master plan as well.
Did I understand you to say that the state does give grants for capital projects?
When the legislature funds capital outlay, it's a set-aside to the Economic Development Department. And then the Main Street program at the Economic Development Department goes through a competitive process with those communities that have met the minimum requirements for state certified.
What's the average size of those capital improvement grants?
I think they probably cap out at about $250,000 a year, and
Total or per community?
per community. So if we have $1 million capital outlay, that's 4 projects in a year, right? If we have $5 million, that's quite a few more projects. From 1 year to the next per project, it's about $250,000 provided through that program, which is why the state looks for a project that's going to take phases, require phases. And so they might be able to get you $250,000 for phase 1 this year, $250,000 for the next one next year.
And is a local match required?
Yes.
1 for 1?
It depends on the project. So master planning is a much smaller match to get your master plan done. When you're looking at a big infrastructure project, the state is actually looking for federal dollars, all the state resources that can support a project, but they're almost always just a local match requirement.
So there is money then, not necessarily for capital improvements, but also for the planning phase, for the master planning.
Yes, yes. And most of that money for the master planning came through the capital outlay process. The last couple of years, because it has been variable, sometimes the legislature did not allocate any money for capital outlay. The state has been looking at all the partners and trying to put together funding for these projects. And right now they have some partnerships with NMFA, MFA, and other agencies to help provide planning resources.
So it just depends upon the funding that's been allocated by the state, whether or not there's funding that year for that, okay.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Can you just tell us what's happened with our arts and cultural district and what it's accomplished in the last 5 years since we've been a member, is that correct?
So I can't go back as far as 5 years. I wasn't with New Mexico Main Street at the time, but part of the initial designation, the Arts and Cultural District was staffed at the town, right? So it was, I believe it was a contract, staffed inside the town, providing the resources. As the board, the organization was still developing, right? So there was a lot of foundational leadership development. When I came in 3 years ago is when we launched the actual incorporation process for the ACD. I think the big challenge that we experienced here in Taos is that there was no Main Street organization preceding the Arts and Cultural District. In every other community, the Main Street organization created that organizational infrastructure to help move it. So we're really starting from scratch. As Rick said earlier, the contract moved out of the city. There was a process of going into the county and back in that process of trying to rebuild that right now. Most of the work has been foundational at this point. There have been small projects. We had Team in here a couple years ago that helped with the revitalization of the plaza itself. There were small funds. I think that's when the horseshoe pit came back into the plaza, was part of a Main Street. The gazebo repairs were part of that process as well. We have been in a bit of a holding pattern the last year or so because of we're trying to sort out the MOU with the state, the city, and the county in that process.
Would it be better if we started a Main Street organization instead of trying to do another ACD first with our history?
So 2 years ago, actually a year ago, is when we started working with the arts. And remember I said at the state level, the Arts and Cultural District is not funded. In order to get resources here, or continue providing resources here, there had to be a Main Street organization. So I think that's where we are with TACD, the organization, in rebuilding that, not just the Arts and Cultural District focus, but also the downtown revitalization focus as well. So I would not recommend starting over or building another organization. I think in small communities, you're challenged with people serving on so many boards and spreading your resources too thin.
What date did Taos or the county, the town or the county adopt or get Main Street designation? Because it seems that, it sounds like that was a period when that whole program was in a lull. And was it designated while the lull went on?
So yes, it was a designation. Now, one thing that Rick said, if the city or the county, the local government is not a partner, the state rescinds the program. The state actually does no longer rescinds the designation. They declare your community an inactive, and it puts you in an inactive status, right?
Aren't we in an inactive state right now?
You are, because the MOU has not been executed, and if the county is not a partner, I think, well, I'll just give you a heads up. This year is a year, the MOUs are executed for 2 years. This year is a year that all the MOUs for all the communities are expiring and up for renewal. The state is revising the MOU to reflect new requirements from the National Main Street Center. And so the state is preparing the new round of MOUs right now, and will present that both to Taos Arts and Cultural District Organization and to the Town of Taos coming up.
So it's really not a Main Street program right now.
It has the designation. We have,
So
yeah.
my question was, when was that designation given?
The Main Street came in about a little over 5 years ago. I'm sorry, the Arts and Cultural District. a little over 5 years ago, the primary product of that was the cultural plan. So resources of the state. So it is the ACD parallel to a downtown master plan, right? The Main Street designation was added 2 years ago.
Could you restate that or use it, what, the implication, at least what I'm hearing, is that there is a downtown master plan? No? Yes?
There is a downtown cultural plan. There is not a downtown master plan.
Well, that's pretty extensive. I mean, that could qualify for a master plan. I have to go look at it. It's pretty beefy.
And the state would look as it picks up the work with the Main Street. Actually, there were resources for master planning last year. We were in that lull of working through that process with the MOUs with the city and the county to get that master plan going. So in an ACD community, you would have both the cultural plan and the downtown master plan that is adopted by the local government partner, and that frees up the resources from the state to support the work.
But currently there is no downtown master plan?
Correct.
Correct?
That's correct.
Is there a plan or is there not a plan?
So
There's
It's a cultural plan, not a master plan.
Right.
but you have a comprehensive plan. You have economic plans, right?
Right.
Yes.
So is there an active arts and cultural district board currently in Taos? Or-
We have a couple of members in here right now. So, Rose Vargas from the bank is the chair of that board. Judith Rain is here. Susan Long Henry is on the board. There's about 7 members. We have all been in communication with both Rick at the town and the board about let's pick up the next iteration of the MOU, which is being revised right now by the state.
Rose
So-
Barnes will be here, she's on her way.
Judith, do you want to, do you want to speak to the organization board, who's involved and how your meetings at this point?
I can, or I can answer that. I have something I'd like to read later when you're through, but maybe I'll just follow up at that time.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I just ask, once you get the structure all set up and, people are clear on objectives and is it possible to get funds from other kind of funding sources other than state? I mean, so you really can blossom this, you really can mushroom?
That is the goal. And the state is looking for every possible resource to help its 28 communities in the program. So federal money, private money, foundation money, all other state sources right now. In fact, as the state has a consortium of funding partners, it's called Fund It. It's just taken off at the state, it's a collaboration of all the state agencies plus USDA. in the process.
And is there any one of those 28 communities that has mushroomed into that next level? Has anybody gotten more money?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We have
Just name a couple just to.
a lot of, because of the match requirements for capital outlay process, a lot of those projects are long-term. But to give you some examples of what's been funded. In Clayton, the Historic Luna Theater, both a restoration of the historic theater and a conversion to the digital projection process, right? Capital outlay money. In Clayton as well, a downtown streetscape, benches, trees, sidewalks, cutouts, big infrastructure project, right? Nob Hill received some capital outlay money to examine a business improvement district, an assessment to support the downtown, the development of that district. Lovington right now is a recipient of capital outlay funds and also looking at resources for preservation of their historic theater. I think of the 28 communities right now that exist, at least half, if not closer to 2/3, have received capital outlay funds in one form or another, whether it's for planning or for actual projects.
My understanding that the Arts and Culture District not only is active with the board members, but they're actually at the point where they're ready to do the master plan, and they just need partnership with the town at this point. Is that, and they had that ready last year or a year before, but there was some lack of understanding and that MO never got signed.
So I think I would probably defer to why that didn't happen to Rich at the Economic Development Department, but I will say this, until the master plan is in place, the community is taking on small projects, right? Really around downtown business development, down cultural pieces and events, right? The master plan becomes the strategic plan for the community that aligns the state, the local government, and the Main Street and/or Arts and Cultural District organization in that process. When the resources will be available next for master planning it really depends on the legislative funding.
Just to clear it up just a little bit, Eduardo, a few months ago, the Arts and Cultural District was more active than it is now, and we actually were in a place where we were ready to apply for the funds for creating the downtown master plan. It was blocked because the Town of Taos did not sign the MOU, and there was a number of reasons that happened, and there was quite a bit of sniping going back and forth, and a lot of politics happening, and so the MOU wasn't signed, and so Rich Williams down at the state said, until you guys get this all figured out, we can't get you the downtown development plan.
What's holding up the town?
I think the last iteration of the MOU was not just the town, right? The MOU was written to be inclusive of the town, the county, the state, and the organization. The MOU has to originate at the Economic Development Department, right? So in that process of what resources are we going to have to commit to this work is when the MOU was not signed for a number of reasons, right? But I think
And who's the signee? Who is the person that has the authority?
the city, the town has to adopt a resolution, so the council has to adopt a resolution, and either the city manager or the mayor signs that MOU on behalf of the town. Same with the county. When you have a county partner, it's usually the county commission that adopts that resolution of support, and that basically says, we're gonna allocate the financial resources under this MOU, right? And usually the county manager signs it on behalf of the county. Rich Williams, the state director, and Secretary Baila sign on behalf of the state. And there is usually the board chair of the nonprofit down to the revitalization organization has to sign this. So could be 3 parties, city, state, revitalization organization, or a 4th one with the county. Because the state is revising that MOU now, you will see another iteration of the MOU that reflects the new requirements from the National Main Street Center.
In the event where some of the streets or some of the areas like on the plaza are owned by different entities, I think some are owned by the county, some are owned by the town, some are owned by the Pueblo. I think that's how it works. Do we have to then, would we have to have the town and the county involved in the signing of that?
I think at minimum, you have to have the town, at minimum. I don't think you need the county to sign the MOU, but if the county owns some of that property downtown, and that's part of the infrastructure project that you want to take on, you're going to need the county to be a willing partner in that process. Any other questions?
Actually, can I just clarify that it's not the current town council that didn't sign. It was 2 years ago, the last council. Thank you.
And in that, I think in the discussion since then, 2 years ago, the state has had to actually put a bit of a holding pattern on the MOU. That's sorted out locally. We'll work with the community, and now we're at the phase where we're ready to put a new MOU in front of the community.
Well, what was the holdup for it not being signed as of this date? Which is my question to the town.
Well, there was a lot of newspaper coverage over why it wasn't signed, if you read the press.
I mean, what are the issues that their reservations that are holding up? And is there
I don't think so. I mean, Rich would have to answer that question, but I don't think so, Judith. I think on the state side, the holdup, the state cannot sign the MOU until the other parties have signed. It has to go through their attorneys at the final step.
There is a $35,000 capital appropriation from a year ago from Bobby Gonzalez that is sitting there that the TACD was notified could not be given to them because the town needed to be the fiscal agent.
Correct. Right.
Unless the MOU was signed, there was no conveyance mechanism.
Which, I don't believe that was part of the Main Street set aside, though. It was a direct capital outlay.
Are there any other towns that have just an ACD and no Main Street?
No.
And could you explain why they choose to have Main Street as their primary agency?
History. History first, and then funding, right? Because the state Main Street program is funded by the legislature and has been for 30 years. There's a whole 30-year history of capacity at the state and communities to do that work, right? Arts and cultural districts were added by the state legislature in 2007. And then that statute was modified again in 2011. And so we're talking about a much shorter history and a program that hasn't been fully capitalized by the state legislature.
So are you saying that if we have Main Street, we have a likelihood of getting more funding than if we just have ACD?
The state is, I do not believe the state will be authorizing a standalone ACD again. MORA was authorized last year as an arts and cultural compound. For communities, because that was a stipulation in the statute, right? For communities over 50,000, they can self-designate as an arts and cultural district. They get very little support by way of technical assistance and resources from the state in that process. So our recommendation is build your downtown revitalization process through the Main Street approach, build your downtown revitalization process here in Taos with the Arts and Cultural District work as well.
With which one as the lead agency?
I'm sorry.
Here in Taos, do you recommend the Arts and Culture as the lead agency or the Main Street as the lead agency?
In this case, we're looking at the same model we have we're setting up in Gallup, right? It is one entity that is bringing the business stakeholders for the Main Street revitalization side and the Arts and Cultural District stakeholders in that process. So right now, the designee in Taos is the Taos Arts and Cultural District for both the Main Street and the ACD designation.
So we would be a Main Street town and an ACD town?
Correct.
Okay.
You are a Main Street and an ACD town already. Right now, in inactive status because we're waiting the MOUs to be signed by all the parties.
So I ask my question again, what is the hesitancy, is that a fair word, that the town has that they haven't signed? What are their issues or their concerns with proceeding with this program?
I cannot answer that on behalf of the town, so I would have to turn it over.
It's off the council to see what they say.
And I guess this is an educational process for us because, you know, as new councilman, new mayor, you know, I do have a little history with it when it got transferred back to the county. I know a little bit about it. You know, we moved some projects forward. We were able to get a little bit of funding, but it is an educational process. So this is part of that educational process is we need to figure out how it all works and figure out what it can bring to our community and then decide if we're going to allocate money to it and move it forward. So this is part of the process right here.
But was there a reason in the past that it has been held up for over a year and a half now?
I don't know. I haven't been there that long, Judy. I mean, you know. Fred, do you? I don't know. You know anything about that? You're the
Well, there's a number of things, but part of the problem was that the ACD did not have their 501c3 designation, so we couldn't contract with you. Secondly,
That's it now, for the record.
secondly, the process in order for us to go forward with this is long-range planning. And we did not have a long-range plan set up as far as in the town itself, as far as budgeting process and how much it was going to cost us to do the project. And this was a request of staff, is to put together a budget, a 5-year budgeting plan for the ACD and Main Street. What is it going to cost us? How much do we have to allocate to do the project so that it would be long-term funded, so it would have an opportunity to succeed? That was never given to us as a council. So we had no way to approve an MOU that we had to fund, because there's no sense in getting into a program if you don't have the funds to do it. You're just setting yourself up for failure. So the request was to the staff is to put together how much, and that had to be getting together with the ACD or some other organization out there to tell us what it would take to have a functional Main Street program and an ACD district. And we had some meetings. Rick was part of it when he was at the county, in trying to find out from the community what they wanted to do and how they wanted to go forward with it. And we just never got that off the ground. And so that's why we couldn't sign an MOU because we couldn't come to that agreement. And even with the MOU that came with the county involved, there really was no budget designation as to how the money that was proposed to be put into that 1-year plan was going to be spent. How was it going to be allocated? And a 1-year plan doesn't work. You need to have a long-term plan. And that's what the state wants. They want a commitment from the community that is going to be long-term. And you can't do that unless you forecast what it's going to take for you to make that happen. And that's what we were requesting to be done before we could sign an MOU. It didn't happen. And it didn't happen for 2 reasons. One is you had a change in administration. And prior to that, it was just because there was some disagreements between the downtown area, amongst people within the downtown, amongst organizations or non-organization as to who should represent who or who wasn't being represented. And so there wasn't that feeling of, I think, of being able to create from that side, from the community side, what was really needed and how it should be going forward. And then secondly, from the town, we couldn't decide what organization we wanted to be with because we couldn't get an agreement on how it should be structured. And that was within town staff. And then again, council was looking for, what is it going to cost? What does it take? And are we sure that we can implement this program and carry it forward? Is there the commitment to do it? And dollar-wise as well. So we had to find the budget to do it. And we weren't getting that information, and that's what made the stalemate.
I'm sorry, I don't hear very well. Did you answer Judy's question?
I think I did.
So basically, as far as the town's concerned, it sounds as if they can be convinced that there's a really strong organization and everybody's coming together and putting a really sensible forecast for what could happen down the line, then that's the main holdup. If they feel there's a positive action going to be put together, then they might come aboard and everybody can get together and do something good.
I think the council in this case is very interested in doing something that is going to be positive and move and generate action within the downtown area and preserve it and make it a very viable and vibrant thing. The question is...
Lynn did a fantastic job 8 years ago, bringing everybody together.
No, and I understand that. What I'm trying to say is that in order for that to happen, there has to be buy-in from the merchants and the community along with the town government, and you've got to put together a budget to make that happen. So you've got to come up with an agreement as to what the cost is and then see if you can afford it. Okay? And so one of the things is what's contained in that? How much do you need to improve things capital-wise? How much do you need to, in order for the operation to go forward and move and the organization to be productive and vital? And what does it take to get everybody involved so that you have that involvement? And that's part of the MOU that we are required to sign with the state. It says there are certain things you got to do. You got to put these things in place. If you don't do that and make them work, then you're going to be thrown out of the program. So what does it take to do that? And that's what we're asking to be provided to us in order for us to make a decision that the town can afford to do this and the community can afford to do it, because it's a partnership. It's not one-sided. And so, you know, we can only afford to do so much, and then the community's got to come in from the other side to do the rest. And capital outlay isn't a given. It varies from year to year. And some years there may not be any, as he's indicated, and other years there may be some available. But there's also a requirement that the community itself puts something in. And where is that going to come from? And what is the willingness of the community to put things in place, such as a development district, which is a property tax on that district? That's where that money comes from. Are you willing to tax yourselves to get this thing done? You know, you have to look at the landlords. I mean, the people who own the property, are they willing to vote to put money in a pot to fix the area or not? So all of those factors have to be figured in and saying, can this thing be successful? Or can you do it without some of these things and still make it successful? And I think that can happen, but it takes all of us together, and that's why we're here tonight.
No,
Yes.
just for the mayor. Is there currently a downtown business revitalization committee? Whatever, I've been a part of these in other cities, and I just wondered if there is an existing committee.
The only committee that's been formed right now is the ACD Main Street.
Arts and cultural.
Correct.
There is no downtown revitalization committee?
At this point, no.
No? Okay.
Something that we're looking at.
Okay.
A business district area that we can incorporate. Mr. Bells?
To try to answer Judith's question, when the MOU didn't get signed, it was kind of the perfect storm of everything that could go wrong at the same time. It wasn't just a decision by the town council. There was disagreement in the county between the legal department and the administration as to whether you could give money to an organization and not violate what they called anti-donation. So there was a disagreement between the county and the town's lawyers with the staff that wanted to do it, as well as a disagreement with the state that represented that ACD's main streets are exempt from the anti-donation clause. So, and then you started changing attorneys at both the town and the county. So nobody ever got a clear ruling whether the elected officials didn't know whether they could even vote for this legally. And then because the organization didn't have its 501c3 in place, the next thing that happened was there was a feud between the ACD and the Chamber of Commerce. And I'll be very blunt about that. The head of the Chamber of Commerce wanted to be the Main Street director at that time. I think all that's gone by in the past. There was a feud between the town and the county. And so it was impossible for staff to try to convince two elected bodies to work on a joint project when they weren't talking to each other. And anybody that knows the history of the 911 project and the annexation in the airport, all these issues were going on at the same time. And so Main Street, which represented $35,000 somewhere in somebody's budget, behind a $28 million airport and annexations and a $1.4 million 911 system, didn't get a lot of light in the bigger picture of things. Even the county, when the county took over the Main Street ACD program, did not agree with the state. And I will take the hit for that one of the big reasons we couldn't agree between Rich Williams and myself was, as a former Main Street director, I said, the business community is looking for a business model, and we have a group of dedicated artists that we're asking to revitalize the town, and that wasn't why they got involved. They got involved because they wanted to promote the arts and culture in the district. And so we did the model backwards. And we can all go back and try to figure out who made that decision, whether it was right or wrong. The fact is it was made, and we had to live with it. So now the state and we are sitting in that position of how do we fix that? But the other part of that is that if you just give that minimum $35,000, and God bless you if you think you're going to get a full-time director for $35,000, because all they have to do, that's the only thing they can do with their time is go around with their hand out asking for money, which kind of makes people skeptical about, well, are we really just creating a job for you? Because you're not producing anything. Well, what can you produce if you don't? I mean, you know, people like the lights, okay? That took thousands of dollars. The concert, the Paseo, all these things that people like now that said, well, why didn't the ACD do this? The town had the resources to do that. The ACD had nothing. And the last part that fell apart in that, I want to thank Councilman Peralta, because when all this was going on, he was a voice of reason, and he acted as a good faith broker between the town, the county, the chamber, all the organizations, and he was saying, let's find out what's best for the community. I want to hear what you people want to do. And I think it probably would have died right there if Councilman Peralta hadn't stepped up to the plate and tried to find at least a common dialogue for people. But the last part of that fell apart was when the county took it. I want to tell you that it wasn't just paying a salary, which we had in the budget anyway. It was that the entire planning department, the community development department, the GIS people, public works, everybody got mobilized, and that's a model that I guess caused that disagreement between the county and the town on one side and the state on the other. As we just said, how many nonprofits in this town are in trouble right now that have million-dollar budgets? If you depend on volunteers and fundraising just to keep your doors open, how much time can you spend on really generating? I mean, we're talking about big things. Rebuilding the downtown. How do you do that with a group of volunteers and no money? And it really, and when Councilman Peralta held these hearings, his question was, who's going to step up to the plate? We'll fund the $35,000. We'll give the person there. But who's going to, you know, the little red hen story. We'll bake the wheat, but, you know, who's going to help? And everybody wanted the events, but there was no organization. There was no group of individuals. There was no foundation that stepped up. And I do agree with what the council did, that short of a plan, and the town is the only partner saying, we'll dedicate revenue from the historic district, from the parking meters, which there's barely any. But if you're just going to fund the program with that, and it's going to vary, and you don't know which month the parking's up or down or whatever, you're setting it up to fail. And I don't think any elected official wants to be tied to a program that you know from the beginning doesn't have the resources to succeed. And you as volunteers and community people don't want to be associated with that. So if you're going to make it succeed, there may have to be a compromise that the town provides staff and resources, but the community, in the end, this model on all those circles were missing. The town was standing by itself, or the county, or who was ever doing it. And the businesses are the ones that are supposed to benefit. And it was tough for the ACD to get people to show up to meetings or volunteer. The board members were doing the staff work, and it just, you burn the people out. And we've seen that time and time again in this community and any community. So if all of you are going to be serious about asking these poor elected officials to put their money, your money, and their neck on the line to make this go again, then you got to be willing to go out there, talk to the banks, talk to the chamber, talk to the foundations, and say, how are we going to fund this? And there are some great mechanisms that work in other communities, tax increment financing, business improvement district. But that really is, don't fool yourself. You don't get something for nothing. It means somebody's going to pay for this. And logically, when you do an improvement district, the law says the people that benefit. We hook up sewers, we charge you for it. You may take 20 years to pay it back, we may get loans and grants, but you gotta pay for it. But the thing is, 90% of the Main Street communities in the United States that have ever become communities are still Main Street communities and are thriving. It's a model, it's not the end, but it's a model to prime the engine, to get it started before you can form a business district and a corporation and an improvement district. Sir?
How much does the historic overlay, the downtown business district, contribute to the gross receipt tax?
We have no means of breaking that out. The data is collected by the state, and we can give it to you by industry. We can tell you how much is construction, how much is retail, but we can't tell you what store. That anonymity is important for the businesses, because if you own a business like Nina there, you don't want the person next door to you know whether you're in financial trouble or how much you're making.
I don't mean the individual business, I mean
Central business
as a
district.
group, how much money comes into the town in gross receipts tax from this area?
Rick gave you the answer to that, and that's the problem that we have, is that the state, in its reporting of gross receipts tax, takes it by business category and not location. So Walmart's gross receipts tax and your jewelry store are all lumped together. So we don't know where the tax money comes from that makes up that total that we get. Whether it's construction, it could be on the south side of town or the north side of town, it's all construction. So that's the problem that we have in trying to determine what is happening in one location as compared to another location.
That's stupid, there's gotta be a way
Well,
to.
can I ask a question? Is there any merit in asking the legislature to look at, and it would be statewide, so that every city, one of the categories is not just retail, but it's the central business district, so that every city in New Mexico could get the gross receipts, the answer you're looking for based on what's being collected in the central business district? I mean, it would require a state law, I assume, and is there any merit in going to the state with that? You can't get it immediately, because I understand what he's saying, but
Well,
I'm-
been in business for however long, somebody should have taken this up a long time ago. Because we're being asked at various times for a particular tax on the downtown area.
but you're in the downtown, I assume.
Well, I am.
Right. But they don't collect, they don't.
The data is not collected by, the data is collected by location. However, the categories for reporting the data are not by location. It's by type of business. And so you've got restaurants lumped in with retail and lodging, and so you don't get the breakdowns you need. And I'm just trying to go back through my history and see whether or not legislatively, you could probably request that that information be better defined and put that into law. However, I'm just trying to think how successful you would be at getting that done. And you get a lot of pushback.
It's not that hard.
I understand that. It's not that hard. I agree with you. Politically, in some cases, it's very difficult to get easy things solved.
Yeah, well, that's a problem with everything, is politics. Somebody's gotta stand up and say, we'd like a really simple answer to a simple question.
And I understand that, but that's not so easy to answer on the political side, on the state side. But it's something that can be requested. You'd have to get the request in before next Thursday if you want it done this session. But likelihood of it happening this year, I don't think it's going to happen. But it's a possible question that could be asked for the future. We would love to have that, because it really would tell us what's happening in our community. And it would give us the focus that we need to support our community in revitalizing or strengthening the assets that we have to make them more productive. And that goes for any community, would be that way, but sometimes that's not the way things fall politically. I'm sorry.
It seems if you create a bid or a TIF, that then that area would be classified or created, and then you would be able to mark, or you would be able to, what's the word I want? Track it, because then you would, that district would be created, you could track what was coming in, and those monies would go towards downtown improvements.
Only, here's the problem with the TIF, is that you would have to create a special gross receipts tax in that area, and that can only come from the state. Okay, so you designate an area just like a school district, and you place a tax on it. And then that would give you some of the information you need, but not all of it, because it depends on the size of the district that you have. And that takes special tax designation from the state. And I would say, under the current political situation and the governor indicating no new taxes, you wouldn't get it done. So that's part of what you're looking at, is that there are certain things that you're allowed to do right now by law, and that is, for example, creating a downtown revitalization district which uses property taxes, not gross receipts taxes. And so you can do that, but that doesn't tell you what's happening business-wise. It only tells you how much money you can collect off of properties. So that, you know, so the only thing that we have in play right now that can tell you what you're doing business-wise on a retail basis, because we already know what we're doing on a accommodation basis, because we have the lodgers tax, and that tells us what lodgers are doing. But that doesn't necessarily relate to what's happening economically within your community, because lodgers tax is not doing so well, but gross receipts tax is doing well. So you know, they're not necessarily related, and that's one of the problems we have in trying to figure out exactly what's going on. So the question over here of trying to get something that is more pertinent to the information that you need is really what we should be trying to get, and that will help us more than trying to impose something that doesn't really do the job for you.
And also, if you were to apply a TIF or bid to, let's say, the ACD, you have to keep in mind that the ACD is actually centered in the plaza and then goes a mile radius outside of that. So your TIF or your bid would not give you an indication of how the downtown is doing. So if you wanted to have that indication of how the downtown is doing, what Councilman Peralta just talked about, having a downtown development committee or something like that would be about the only way to be able to approach that. You couldn't do it with the ACD. I'm not sure about the Main Street program.
Not quite understanding your statement, but depends on what you're looking at for markers to make a determination as to what is happening. Now, you can do that by survey, which isn't real accurate, but that's one way you can do it, is take those businesses within that and survey them and say, are you doing better this year than last year? We keep all of your information confidential, and just tell us by ballot, for example, are you 10% better this year or 10% worse than last year, or whatever it might be. That's one way to get information, but it's not really accurate, because in a lot of cases some people don't feel that they want to tell you exactly what they're doing because they don't really trust you that you're going to be confidential. Let me answer this question up here first. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Would Main Street help the communities get that kind of information from the state, since you are part of the Economic Development Department? Could you possibly?
I think that state Main Street would like to see as well, right? I mean, I think it would be really helpful to the program. It isn't an easy piece. It's a logical kind of decision to make, but any policy change requires a comprehensive review of the fiscal impacts. And so they can make the policy change and realize it's going to cost $15 million to create or adjust the database and to collect and report that data. But I think if the Main Street's policy side, there are two angles. The administration and the secretary set their departmental policy desires, and then the coalition of Main Street communities, which is all the member organizations, also set their policy needs. Their policy focus has always been, let's get money in the capital outlay fund, right? Which is operations on the department side, capital outlay fund on the other
It's
side.
great to have that money, however, if you're asking a community to stand behind that and they can't get the base information that they need to be able to say, yes, we will, or no, we can't, that's not a win-win.
Right. I think we recognize. There are some commercial data sources that can provide some basic analysis, but it's not gross receipts tax. I mean, they can tell you what the health of the economic health is of your, and UNM's Bureau of Business and Economic Research is tracking data as well, but it isn't at that level of refinement that we're looking for. But I think that's a question you would want, I can relate to the state. Where would they stand on that position?
Well, because it's kind of like, hi, we need this from you, but you can't have it.
Right.
I mean, you can't get it. You can't get it, yeah, and that seems not very, left hand's not talking to the right hand.
The data belongs to the Tax and Revenue Department.
Oh,
And
we love that.
Well, that's public, that belongs to us.
correct. But it is not collected that way right now, as we mentioned before. And so I think would the Main Street program be behind that policy? I think they would be very much interested in it.
Well, I'm just wondering if they can help since you're already inside the door.
I'll be happy to ask. I would be happy to relay that question.
It is helpful to point out that, and you kind of went over it briefly, that as part of being a Main Street community, you are required to collect certain data. There isn't always possible to make a cause and effect connection, but some of the things that you can track are job gains, jobs lost within that district. Did you have an effect on it? Stores that open, stores that close, number of vacancies, increase or decrease in property values. There's a whole list of them that you report on a quarterly, fortunately it's quarterly, not monthly.
Well, building rehabilitations.
Right, money invested by a new investment, either in business or capital into, and so you can, in the long term, get sort of a sign of whether the community is moving in the right direction.
And I wanted to add, because when Judith asked her question earlier, I think it's important to just place a little bit of reality on every community situation. A town or a county government signing the MOU with the state and the local partner does not mean next year you have a different downtown. This is a long-term process. And we have Main Street communities that have been incorporated in the state for 25 years, and every year or every 2 years, the community has to weigh their priorities financially with respect to their revenues. And it's a constant level of work and engagement that has to go on. And so don't expect that because the town would sign an MOU this year, everything is going to change next year. It really is a long-term process.
Does the state of New Mexico work with redevelopment districts? California is big on redevelopment. Is it, and Arizona, is it recognized here?
I'm sorry, I did not hear e-development?
Redevelopment programs, which are big in California and big in Arizona. Arizona may have capped off on that, but does New Mexico deal with those?
New Mexico does, but really those are only happening right now in the bigger communities, in Las Cruces and Albuquerque. Yeah, I mean, Albuquerque has a business improvement district, Gallup has a business improvement district, Las Cruces is the only one that has a TID district, so their Main Street program there in Las Cruces has a much heavier focus on redevelopment than revitalization. So
you know that term I mean, it's where an area is designated as a redevelopment area, and the monies, I'm not sure I can properly explain it, but the taxes are held at that level.
Yes.
And as the taxes accrue, after a couple of years, it comes back to that territory to be used for public improvement.
the answer is yes. And there are two requirements now that the state is requesting of each community is that they adopt a local economic development act, an ordinance locally, and a metropolitan redevelopment area, which is that designation. Yes.
A question, isn't this the right time to talk about improving the town where the ski valley is spending so much money up there to bring people into town, through town, to the ski valley with all their summer programs? Isn't this an opportunity now for us to get our act together and clean up the place?
Yes, sir. I totally agree with you.
Well, get on it.
Totally agree with you. That's what we're trying to do.
And stop fighting.
Thank you. Anyone else?
So Judith, now's the time to.
Judith?
Plastic bags.
What?
I was teasing Judith.
I might read something, thank you. What we have here is a failure to communicate. That's really what's going on. I've heard some things tonight that I didn't know, which are contrary to what I thought. So it is a serious case of not sitting down at the table and really knowing both issues. When I kept saying, what is it that the town is hesitant about? I really need that answered, and I also am sure that there's things from the Arts and Culture District point of view that they need to be aware of, and perhaps I will read a little from what I wrote about that. One thing, the Main Street is different from an Arts and Culture District. And the Main Street really deals with hardcore and a lot of businesses. The Arts and Cultural District is taking care of the art wing. And I think we've done a pretty good job considering what has been talked about today with zero funds, so to speak. So the board, the town, as I understand it, is really being presented with the decision about a Main Street and whether to go with the state. And I am alarmed and worried about if they choose not to go with state, i.e. go it alone. And that's the issue they're faced with. And the Arts and Culture District is now kind of the handmaiden, which is fine. I welcome being a handmaiden and subservient to the bigger issue of the town and its major issues and concerns with budgets. But I do not want, it sounds as though the Arts and Culture District itself will fold if the town decides to go it alone and not take advantages of all of the benefits that Eduardo has been so kind to talk about today. In that light, I am authorized and wish to give an invitation to what I would call a continuance of this meeting, the Taos Arts and Cultural District Main Street, or maybe it should be Main Street Arts and Cultural District. I'm comfortable with that. We'll host with our state partner, Eduardo and Rich Williams, a continuance of this meeting the first week in March, so that I think we can talk about some of the details and this lack of communication, a failure in communication that I referred to, so that everybody is on the same page. There's too many things that we will get the 100,000, it's available, no it isn't. We will be able to do this, no it isn't. The MU could be signed tomorrow and things would change, or no, we now have a new one which is being worked on at state. I think I will read this for you because I have the opportunity to. My name is Judith Rain, and I, along with my husband, the late Bill Rain, longtime Taos painter, owned and operated Rain Gallery on historic Ladue Street for over 10 years. Prior to coming to Taos, I worked in the computer field as a computer systems analyst, computer scientist, and instructor. I've worked for business, academia, and government.
including Arthur D. Little, IBM, Standard Oil of California, U.S. Government, UNIVAC, New Mexico Tech, and Medical Services Administration. I have also been very active in the peace movement, have walked across the United States in 1986 as a board member and as part of the Great Peace March for Global Nuclear Disarmament and Social Justice. Since coming to Taos, I worked as executive director at the TAA, the now Taos Center of the Arts. I've worked in several weaving stores, worked as a math tutor for several charter schools, and I have been or am on several boards in Taos relative to education and the arts. I'm a writer, a weaver, and an actor. I currently write on the arts for the Taos News. I exhibit my knittings and weavings at Las Comadres and John Dunn Shops, and I'm a member of Screen Actors Guild, having appeared in Breaking Bad and recently in Frontera. I am telling you all of this to let you know of my background and concern, of course, in all aspects of business and academia and art in Taos. As a longtime member of the Taos Project and now board member of the Arts and Cultural District and Main Street, which is the heir to the Taos Project, I can attest to its value, purpose, and function in the community. Thanks to the hard work of its leadership and to the endless and valuable resources the state Arts and Cultural District and New Mexico Main Street continues to offer and assist Taos. Money's currently available for economic development, and we can look forward to the monies. But I wanted to remind you about, which you already know. I'll tell you that the Taos Arts and Cultural District has been in existence since 2009, and in that time as a partner with the town and the state, it has completed 3 of the 4 steps required by the state to be implemented before the town qualifies for the monies from capital outlay programs. The state Arts and Culture District Main Street has continued to stand by and support the Taos Arts and Cultural Main Street in spite of having to put us on a temporary hiatus status for lack of the MOU being signed. Edward Martinez from the state, New Mexico Arts and Cultural District Main Street is here today to demonstrate that backing, along with making a presentation as to the value, purpose, and functions of towns within New Mexico who have received recognition of that distinct designation. I am concerned that the loss of the monies from the state and their backing and the risk, I am concerned that the loss of the monies from the state are not the only things that will be at risk should the town decide to forego state designations. Although currently there are, as you know, 29 communities within the state, and there's 9 ACTs. My concern is that the heart and pulse of the town does not reside within the municipalities. And I'm saying this in the sense of if the town goes it alone, I do not think it will have the heart and beat of an arts and cultural district, and that's what worries me. Their job is to ensure that laws are followed, safety systems are in place, and that the community is clean and healthy. In the United States Constitution, states' rights are recognized for many reasons, not the least of which is the right and option for states to be more innovative, imaginative, and experimental than a country might be able to be. Experimental being the key word here, to try something out for the country as a whole, to be imaginative and to help foster betterment on behalf of the people. And that is not unlike what I see for the Arts and Cultural Main Street program is all about. It responds and stretches the arms of the people in a community. And this, again, I want to repeat, is what I fear we will lose if we lose working with the state Arts and Cultural District and Main Street program. The Taos ACD Main Street program went to the town and in partnership with the town covered the parking meters during the Christmas season, allowing for free parking. Key words being went to the town and worked in partnership. This is an innovation that came from the Taos merchants. The Taos Arts and Culture Main Street merchants on their own chose to declare a no tax period, again, during the Christmas season, which was a big success. Tax was, of course, paid for by the business owners, but not charged to the customers. This, too, was an initiative that came from the town merchants. And the town ACD Main Street acted on behalf of the community in responding to empty storefronts, again, during the economic hard times, and negotiated behind-the-scenes lower rent options. This was, again, an initiative that concerned the Taos merchants and to which the Arts and Cultural District Main Street took responsive action. None of the above would, could, or should come from a municipal government. These are part of the community rights and responsibilities, I might add. And just as states' rights belong to the states, so community rights belong to the community. And I emphasize the community rights because by giving, I think, the Taos Main Street to the town itself jeopardizes the input that they have emphasized is required from the community, and I agree with that. It is in this light the state and Taos ACD Main Street has set up a public forum, the one I announced to you the first week in March, to continue this discussion. I personally wish to invite the mayor and all the town council members and the city manager to be our honored guests at this forum, where they too will be given an opportunity to express their reservations and concerns for more time, more depth, and where their hesitancies can be addressed. Thank you. I'm sorry it took up so much time.
Rose Vargas, I know you're the president. Did you want to chime in? I don't know if you did. I don't want to put you on the spot. I'm sorry. I did, though.
I don't mind. I'm just driving in from Albuquerque. It's been a very long day.
Sorry
I'm tired of sitting, so that's why I'm standing and here close to the air. But I've been with the Arts and Cultural District Main Street. It was 2 years in January, and was recently appointed as president for this organization. And, you know, it has come a long way. There have been a lot of man hours by previous board members from the originators who took the time to recognize that there was value in applying for this for Taos. And, you know, this is something that is not accomplished overnight. And it is not successful by any one entity. It takes a community, and a united one. And we know that there are going to be differences, but I do believe that there is a lot to be offered by, you know, partnering the town, the county, with ACD Main Street. And, you know, a lot of this is still a work in progress, but there has also been a lot of work done. And I think that to change the model at this time is really not in the best interest for anybody. And I ask that, you know, we all come together, and we know that, you know, we will probably disagree, but in the end, the final income should be for, not just for today, not for just tomorrow, but, you know, 5, 10 years down the road. Let's continue as a community to always be looking around the corner together. So I just want to, you know, reinstate what Judith just said. Let's meet. And, you know, we all have great ideas. The power of all of us can be very, very successful. Thank you.
Councillor Hahn, you had a comment?
Judith, do you have a date, time, and place for that meeting?
It'll be the first week of March.
I need a date.
The date is dependent upon our also invited guests. First week of March has been determined.
I will check with Rich Williams at the state. His schedule is a little bit more difficult right now because he's involved in the legislative process. But we could look at a schedule for that first week and get back to you in the next couple of days.
Perfect.
So we have no date, time. What about a place?
I'll let you know that too.
Okay, so could I ask a big favor of you? When
Yes.
you and Eduardo get this nailed down,
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, would it be possible for Renee to put out a PSA so that we can attend. I'm just concerned, 2 weeks away, and
Good,
we don't have a date, time, and place, and we need to be there.
perfect, we'll
So-
get that out as soon as we can.
But is that all right, Mr. Mayor?
Yes,
I've
we
worked
can do that.
through the manager who gets you to Renee so we can get PSA out.
Thank you,
I thank you, Judy.
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I just have one closing comment,
Please.
Mayor. So I will check with Rich. I will say right now, I think his schedule is going to be really difficult until the end of the legislative session, but it's probably important to have him here in that process. I can find out by tomorrow. The last thing I just wanted to say is Taos, the community of Taos is in a really good space right now around this work, right? We can spend a lot of time thinking about what didn't happen and what went wrong, and I think having people in these meetings really about you can learn from those what went wrong, but don't dwell on them. Now is a good time to say, let's figure out what we need to do next to move it forward, and the state is ready to partner with you in that process.
So, Mr. Martinez, thank you again for coming. We really appreciate it. Thank you for taking your evening and coming down to Taos. Hope you got a good meal while you were here. And again, thank you all for being here. I think we pretty well covered everything on our agenda. You know, what's next, Mr. Bellis? You want to speak to that before we kind of call it quits? I think we have one more meeting that we really would like to we really like to, and we will put out an agenda on the topics, and hopefully we can get some additional participation. I think when the more people that get involved, the better off, the more people we hear from. So again, thank you for coming. There is some information here if you grab one on the way out. And again, anything else from the public that we need to hear from? Councilor Hahn?
Sorry. I notice 4C is the Downtown Business and Merchants Association. What's an update with that?
Well, Councilor, you know, that's probably going to be our next, what's next, because we're trying to form a merchants association from the downtown area, but I think we need to kind of hear from this other meeting what takes place before we go any further with that. So,
okay,
that's,
excuse me.
That's all right.
And then other concerns. There are issues happening down at the plaza that I think we need to look at as a community from a planning and zoning and historic preservation perspective that we have not touched on tonight. I'm going to presume that third and final meeting will be the time to begin to flush some of that.
Something about the neon lights,
Something
different.
about neon,
yeah, there's a couple of issues. Yes, sir. Yeah.
I was just wondering if you've driven around the plaza lately.
We have.
About 22 potholes that are about 3 foot wide and about a foot deep. And I can't drive my car around without bottoming out.
Yes.
It's really bad in the plaza.
Yes, and we have gone through and we put fill in them once already. The minute the plow goes over them, it pulls it back out. So, yeah, well, we have a new mix.
I was just informed that there were speed bumps.
So, we in our mid-year budget adjustments, we do have additional monies that will be allocated for addressing a lot of those potholes. So, we'll.
About the blowout tire repairs, is that included?
We appreciate it then.
Trying to increase GRTs. This is an economic development.
Just messing with you.
Yeah. Maybe they can stop and run off and buy something in the stores because you have to go so slow through the plaza. So again, thank you for coming, and we look to see you in a couple of weeks. And as soon as that meeting comes available, we'll get the date, time, and place out to you. And Judith, if you would need a building, we have a building available. Okay? Thank you. Appreciate it.